August 480 BC. Thermopylae, Greece. Imagine standing at the narrow edge of the known world. To one side, a wall of stone rises above you. To the other, the sea presses close against the land, and between them lies a thin strip of dust, rock, heat, and death. Through that narrow corridor, the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever seen is coming. The Persian soldiers by the tens of thousands, cavalry, chariots, archers, engineers, and among them, the legendary immortals, the elite guard of the Persian Empire. Behind them stands an empire stretching from Egypt to the borders of India. At its head is Xerxes I, King of Kings, a ruler who has already crushed kingdoms, bent cities to his will, and bridged an entire sea so his army could march from Asia into Europe. To Xerxes, this is not just a campaign. It is a message. Greece will kneel, and if it refuses, Greece will disappear. Standing against him is Leonidas I, King of Sparta. He has roughly 7,000 Greeks with him. Among them are 300 elite Spartans. By every rule of ancient warfare, this should not be a battle. It should be an execution. And yet, for days, here, the greatest army on earth is stopped cold by a few thousand men in a narrow mountain pass. Xerxes sends wave after wave. The line does not break. The Persians throw their best troops into the corridor. The Greeks hold, and when the pass finally falls, it is not because Leonidas is defeated in open battle. It is because the fatal blow comes from a place he never expected. So how did a small Greek force hold back an empire? And what finally ended the stand at Thermopylae? To understand that, you first have to understand the machine that was coming. This was not a simple invasion. It was revenge. 10 years earlier, Xerxes' father, Darius, had tried to punish Greece. In 490 BC, Persian forces landed at Marathon. Their navy dominated the Aegean. The Greek city-states were divided, suspicious of one another, and politically fragile. On paper, Persia should have won, but Athens did the impossible. Outnumbered Athenian soldiers charged directly into the Persian line. They ran across the battlefield and smashed into an army that had expected them to collapse. Instead, the Persians broke. They retreated to their ships. Greece survived. For Darius, Marathon was more than a military defeat. It was humiliation. He spent the remaining years of his life preparing for a second invasion, one large enough to crush Greece completely. But Darius died before he could return. His son Xerxes inherited the throne. He also inherited the army, the ambition, and the wound. And Xerxes would not repeat his father's mistake. He would not send a limited force. He would bring the empire itself. He ordered 2 massive pontoon bridges built across the Hellespont, the strait dividing Asia from Europe. Warships were lashed side by side, covered with planks, timber, and soil, creating a road across the water. An entire army would walk from one continent to another. When a storm destroyed the first bridges, Xerxes' rage became legend. He ordered the sea itself to be whipped. 300 lashes for daring to defy the King of Kings. Then he built the bridges again. He ordered a canal cut through a peninsula to spare his fleet a dangerous voyage. Supply depots were prepared across Thrace and Macedonia. Roads, ships, soldiers, animals, provisions, everything moved according to imperial command. This was not just logistics. This was an empire forcing geography to obey. Modern estimates place Xerxes' army somewhere between 120,000 and 300,000 men. Even the lowest estimate was terrifying. No Greek army had ever faced anything like it. As the Persian army advanced, city after city surrendered. They sent Xerxes earth and water, the ancient symbols of submission. Their land, their rivers, their freedom. Most of Greece bent before the storm arrived, but 2 cities refused, Athens and Sparta. Both had already insulted Persia years earlier by killing the envoys sent by Darius. That act had been more than defiance. It had been a declaration. Now the consequence was coming. And here is what many people misunderstand about Thermopylae. Leonidas did not march north with only 300 Spartans because Sparta had no more soldiers. He marched with 300 because Sparta was in the middle of a sacred festival. The Carneia, a religious celebration dedicated to Apollo, was underway. Spartan law forbade full military campaigns during certain religious observances. That same restriction had delayed Sparta during the Battle of Marathon. But this time, waiting could mean disaster. So the Sparta's ruling council gave Leonidas special permission, not for a full mobilization, only for a forward force. Take the royal bodyguard, march north, hold the pass, buy time. The rest of Sparta would come later. But there was another shadow over the decision. Before leaving, Leonidas had consulted the oracle at Delphi. The message was brutal. Either Sparta would fall, or a Spartan king would die. Leonidas understood. He was not simply marching to delay an invasion. He was walking toward a prophecy. That is why he chose his 300 so carefully. Not only the strongest, not only the most disciplined, he chose men who already had sons, men whose family lines would continue if they died. This was not just an elite fighting unit. It was a chosen sacrifice. Leonidas himself was around 60 years old. He had not been born expecting to become king. He was the third of 4 sons. Not the obvious heir, but fate had placed the crown on his head, and now fate had placed Xerxes in his path. As Leonidas marched north, other Greek forces joined him. Thespians, Thebans, Phocians, Corinthians, and others. By the time the Greeks reached Thermopylae, their force numbered more than 7,000 men. They came from different cities, different political systems, and different rivalries. But they understood one thing. Here, if Xerxes passed through Thermopylae and entered southern Greece, there might be nothing left to defend. So they entered the pass, and they waited. Thermopylae means hot gates. The name came from the sulfur springs bubbling nearby, giving the place an ancient, volcanic presence. Today, the landscape looks different. Silt has pushed the sea back over the centuries. The land is wider now, but in 480 BC, the battlefield was a trap made by nature, between the cliffs and the Malian Gulf. The corridor was narrow. At its widest, it was only about 100 meters across. At its narrowest point, the middle gate. Where Leonidas placed his line, it became almost impossibly tight, and that changed everything. Persia had numbers, but numbers mean little when only a fraction of them can fight at once. Cavalry cannot maneuver in a corridor boxed in by cliffs and sea. Archers lose their power when the enemy is already close enough to strike. Massed infantry cannot surround a line when the terrain forces them into a funnel. The Persian Empire's greatest advantage is size. Speed, cavalry, and overwhelming missile fire were blunted the moment they entered the pass. The Greeks also had a wall. Years earlier, the Phocians had built a defensive wall there against attacks from Thessaly. By the time Leonidas arrived, it had fallen into ruin, so he ordered it rebuilt. Stone by stone, the Greeks restored the barrier. It gave them an anchor, a fixed line, a place where they could stand and refuse to move. Leonidas also knew about a danger above them. Here, a mountain path called the Outnumbered Trail ran through the hills and could bypass the Greek position entirely. Local people had warned him, so Leonidas sent 1,000 Phocian soldiers to guard the heights. He believed that would be enough. For 4 days after arriving, Xerxes waited. He expected the Greeks to retreat. He expected them to see the scale of his army and choose survival. Instead, they stayed. Xerxes sent a scout forward. The Persian rider approached the Greek camp, studied it, and returned. What he reported confused the king. The Spartans were not panicking. They were not frantically sharpening weapons or building defenses. They were combing their hair, stretching, exercising, preparing calmly. Xerxes asked Demaratus, an exiled Spartan king traveling with him, hear what this meant. Demaratus answered plainly. The Spartans were preparing to fight and to die. When Spartan warriors dressed their hair before battle, it meant they were about to risk everything. Xerxes did not believe it. He still thought fear would do what force had not yet done. So he sent terms. Lay down your weapons. Submit, become friends of the Persian people. Live. Leonidas answered with 2 words that would echo for centuries. Mol and Lab. Come and take them. Still, Xerxes waited. He gave the Greeks more time to reconsider. More time to look at the impossible army before them. More time to run. They did not run. On the 5th day, Xerxes attacked. He sent the Medes and Scythians first, 10,000 men. Their orders were clear. Capture the defenders alive and bring them before the king. But the pass was waiting. The Greek phalanx formed at the narrowest point. Imagine being a Persian soldier in that first wave. You have marched with the army that crossed the Hellespont. You have seen nations surrender before a sword was drawn. You believe you are part of the greatest force on earth. Then you step into Thermopylae, and the world closes around you. Ahead is bronze, a wall of shields. The Greek hoplites standing shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapping, their spears thrust forward in layered rows. The man in front is protected by the men behind him. The line breathes as one body. You push. It does not move. You push harder. The Greeks rotate fresh men forward and pull tired men back. Disciplined, precise, relentless. You are not fighting a loose crowd of warriors. You are fighting a machine built perfectly for this terrain. From his throne, Xerxes watched. Ancient accounts say he rose from his seat 3 times. Not in victory, in disbelief. The first waves were driven back, so Xerxes sent more troops. The result was the same. Then he sent his finest soldiers, the Immortals, 10,000 elite warriors. They were called Immortals because their number was always kept constant. When one man fell, another replaced him. On paper, the unit never weakened. They were the pride of Persia. Among them were noble spear-bearers, men close to the king himself. They had never failed. They entered the pass expecting to break the Greeks quickly, but Thermopylae gave them no room to become legends. The Greek line held. The spears stayed forward. The shields did not open. The Immortals were pushed back. For 2 days, the greatest army in the world crashed against a few hundred meters of Greek bronze. Xerxes tried regular infantry. He tried elite troops. He tried pressure numbers and repeated assaults. Nothing worked. And then, on the second night, a man entered the Persian camp. His name was Ephialtes of Trachis. He was a local Greek. He knew the mountains above Thermopylae. He knew the hidden paths. And he offered Xerxes what no Persian scout had found: a way around the pass, the Outnumbered trail, a route through the hills that would bypass the Greek wall and come down behind Leonidas' position. His motive was simple: reward, greed. For that betrayal, his name became remembered as a curse. In Greek memory, Ephialtes became the name of nightmare. Xerxes acted immediately. That night, he sent the Immortals up the mountain path. Thousands of soldiers moved through darkness, guided by a traitor. At dawn, the Phocians guarding the heights heard something. Not voices, not battle cries. The sound of leaves being crushed under many feet. They rushed to arms. For a moment, both sides hesitated. Then the Persians fired arrows, not to destroy the Phocians, only to force a passage. The Phocians believed they were the main target. They pulled back to higher ground, ready to die there. But the Persians did not stop. They marched past them. The path was open. Before sunrise, Leonidas received the news. Messengers came from the heights. His own scouts confirmed it. The Persians were behind them. The pass had been turned. Leonidas called a council. At that moment, the mission changed. Holding Thermopylae was no longer possible. Many allied contingents withdrew. Some were ordered away. Others chose to leave. Thebans, Corinthians, Arcadians. More than 4,000 men departed. They would live to fight again. Their lives still had value in the war to come. But the 300 Spartans stayed. So did 700 Thespians. The Thespians had every reason to leave, but their city lay directly in Persia's path. If Boeotia fell, the spy would burn. They chose to die at Thermopylae rather than return home and wait for destruction. Some Thebans remained as well. Whether by loyalty or compulsion, the sources disagree. In total, around 2,000 men remained. They knew exactly what the morning would bring. This was no longer about victory. It was no longer even about holding the pass. The pass was already lost. Now it was about the cost. At dawn, Xerxes performed libations. Here, he waited for the Immortals to descend from the mountains and close the trap. Then he ordered the full attack from the front. Leonidas made his final decision. He would not wait behind the wall to be surrounded. He moved his men forward, into the wider part of the pass, toward the Persian army, not defending, attacking. If they were going to die, they would kill as many Persians as possible before the end. They would not crouch behind stones and wait for the empire to close its fist. They would run at it. The final assault was savage. The Greeks drove forward with desperate violence. Herodotus records that 2 of Xerxes' own brothers died in the fighting. Leonidas fell in the chaos. Some accounts say he was struck down deep in the enemy line. Then came one of the fiercest struggles of the ancient world. The Greeks fought to recover their king's body. Again and again, they surged forward. 4 times, they drove the Persians back. 4 times, they fought through the press of bodies to reclaim Leonidas. When their spears broke, they drew swords. And when swords were lost, they fought with hands, with teeth, with everything left in them. Then the immortals arrived from behind. The trap closed. The Thebans broke away and surrendered, hands raised. Many were killed before the surrender was accepted. The survivors were branded with Xerxes' royal mark. The Spartans and Thespians fell back together to a small hill behind the wall. There was nowhere else to go. Xerxes gave the final order. Persian archers covered the hill in arrows. They fired until nothing moved. The pass was open, and this is where the truth matters. Thermopylae was not a Greek victory. The pass fell. Xerxes marched south. Athens was evacuated. The Acropolis was looted and burned. If you measure the battle by ground held, objectives achieved, or armies saved, Thermopylae was a defeat. Ancient historians knew it. Modern historians say it clearly. And yet, something happened there that changed the war. Not because Leonidas bought months of time. He did not. Not because the Persian invasion was stopped there. It was not. What changed was the story. Here, Thermopylae proved something the Greek world desperately needed to believe. Persia could bleed. The immortals were not immortal. The empire could be resisted. The math of overwhelming power could be made to fail inside a narrow pass. Against men who had already accepted death. Across Greece, soldiers heard what happened. They heard that 300 Spartans and their allies had held against Xerxes. They heard that Leonidas stayed when he could have left. They heard that the defenders fought even after the pass was lost. Thermopylae did not save Greece, but it gave Greece a story strong enough to keep fighting. Leonidas knew the prophecy. He knew a Spartan king had to die. He chose men whose sons would survive them. He marched into the pass anyway. He held until there was no pass left to hold. And then, when the empire finally came around behind him, he did not kneel. He attacked. 2,500 years later, the world still remembers. But Thermopylae was only the beginning. 6 weeks later, at Salamis, the Greek fleet would face the Persian navy in narrow waters. One man would design a plan so bold, so dangerous, that even his own allies doubted him. His name was Themistocles, and he was about to lure the most powerful navy in the world into a trap. Xerxes was so confident that he built a throne on a hillside to watch the destruction of the Greeks. He believed he was about to witness the final collapse of resistance. Instead, that throne would give him a front row seat to disaster. The Battle of Salamis, a single afternoon, a narrow strait, and the fate of the Greek world hanging on the water.